Hello, welcome to the June briefing on Internet governance for our colleagues here in Geneva, for those of you who are joining online or via our hubs in Jakarta, Tunis, and Rio de Janeiro. As you probably know, we have a quite historical period initiated by last week Brexit vote. I'm sure that all of you are involved somehow in discussions reflecting on the impact of the Brexit on the broader digital policy. And we will today obviously reflect on that as much as we can, given the sort of immediacy of the development and overall impact on, in particular, digital policy. For those of you who are attending this briefing for the first time, I would like just to provide the overall context. Every last Tuesday of the month, we meet at 1 o'clock Geneva time for updates on digital policy developments. The main purpose is to provide you with 1 hour update, overall update, what's going on in digital policy. Here is the list summary of the major developments on 20 pages. The developments are very, very intensive. But the purpose is to have zoom out view and overall understanding of the major trends. In addition to the briefing itself, the briefing is based on Internet Governance Barometer, which is prepared by our experts, which you can see if the pressure is rising, remaining the same, or it's falling down when it comes to specific issues. During every briefing, we go issue by issue and provide the updates of the major developments. In addition, you can also have the Digital Watch newsletter, Geneva Internet Platform Digital Watch newsletter, which is again providing the overall review of developments during the previous month, some editorial and some reflection what has been going on in this field. We will start with the next, Arvin. Therefore, you can consult Internet Governance briefing page, and you can also see what are the main events in June. As you can see, we have had a very, very busy month. We won't be going through the list of the events. We will be referring to them during the specific discussion on specific topics. Next. We will come to the first issue, which is the global IG architecture. This is the point where we will definitely mention the question of Brexit and the potential impact of the Brexit on the Internet governance. So far, based on our analysis, and you can follow the blog post on this, we came to two conclusions. The first conclusion is that it is very unlikely that there will be difficult discussions, Brexit-related discussion when it comes to the digital field, because the alignment of the United Kingdom with the rest of Europe is quite high when it comes to digital issues related to cybersecurity, to the large extent data protection and other digital issues. Therefore, this is sort of good news. A more deeper and profound impact is on the question how the Brexit will challenge the overall globalization and integration paradigm. We have to keep in mind that this is the major political development, which is to the large extent, according to many commentators, in a way, protest vote against impact of globalization. Now, since the internet is technological infrastructure of the globalization, since through internet we experience the globalization, we can exchange messages, we can access websites on different positions worldwide, it is very likely that there will be increasing pressure from those of you who are critical about the impact of globalization on the question of the internet. And this underlying message, although it's not coordinated, was also echoed in the report of the Global Commission on Internet Governance. The name of this report is One Internet. This report is a third major report which came this year on internet governance issues. First was a report by the World Bank on digital dividends at the beginning of the year. At the same time, we had a report by World Economic Forum on internet fragmentation, and you have now the report of the Global Commission on Internet Governance, One Internet. This report is a result of 2 years long work of one Canadian institution, and the Chatham House, CIGI from Waterloo in Canada. What is common point for all of these reports, including the last one, which didn't take in consideration, obviously, the Brexit, because it was prepared before and launched before the Brexit? The underlying message is that Internet as a great enabler, as a tool and platform that has been pushing the economic, social, and cultural development, has not been delivering always to the society as we expect. This was a clear message of the World Bank report in Digital Dividends, that impact on jobs, on productivity, even political inclusion is not as optimistic as it is sometimes portrayed into the overall rhetorics. That message is also mentioned in this report. All three reports have, in a way, underlying balance you can now find in any literature on internet governance and digital policy. On one hand, you have great potentials of the internet. On the other hand, you have challenges. I'm afraid that the challenges part is really growing quite fast. Challenges coming from disintegration, question of security, question of discussion on encryption, data protection. Now, in our text analysis of this report, we found 71 mentioning of trust and trustworthy. And this is probably, if you have to choose the keyword of this month briefing, trust. Now, this is good news. Who can have anything against trust? Trust is a positive value, but it is also a bit worrying signal, because trust is rather evasive concept. How to build the trust, how to achieve trust is not as easy, as operational as we can admit. Therefore, some of our colleagues who was participating in our discussion cynically pointed that when we don't have anything else to propose, we rely on strengthening the relevance of trust. And that was also underlying message in this report. And we'll reflect later on the OECD meeting in Mexico. Trust came again as underlying message. Next field where we didn't have any major development, I would say, was sustainable development. It is, as you can see, equal. We had two major events. One is the first multi-stakeholder forum on science, technology, and innovation for SDGs, arguing basically that we need enabling environment, policy, economic, social environment for the utilizing benefits of technology for SDGs. This is more or less reiterating the message that has been going for some time. Commonwealth ICT ministers also endorsed strategic plan for Commonwealth Telecommunication Organization for the next 4 years, underlying importance of this link between sustainable development and ICTs. Next, Arvin. Much more eventful was field of security, cybersecurity. As you can expect, this is a fast-growing field, and we have up the arrow up since the beginning of the year when it comes to cybersecurity. One major development of the long-term relevance was the declaration by NATO ministers of defense at their meeting of 15th of June that cyberspace should be considered so-called fourth operational domain, in addition to air, land, and sea. It is going to have really important long-term consequences when it comes to the internet security, NATO activities, and activities of other countries. Therefore, cyber is moving into the military doctrines. It has been for some time, but now it is officially moving strongly into military doctrines. Another development coming from London, and which is not a Brexit, is adoption of the Snoopers Charter, which basically requests telecommunication companies to provide access to encrypted material if it is proportional when it comes to the technical complexity and the cost. And this is all the balance that we have been following since the beginning of the year between, on one hand, security, and on the other hand, freedom of expression, privacy with the encryption. And in this case, this balance is slightly tilted towards the request for the telecom companies, technical companies to provide access. In dark web, suddenly we got 33 million Twitter accounts, which should be sold for 10 Bitcoins, which is something like $8,000. And Twitter provided the answer that it didn't come from their website. We don't know where from it came, but they're apparently, we checked with the people who know this field, they're quite authentic, Twitter accounts and passwords and everything else. It's a worrying sign. United States and India made a very busy month when it comes to cybersecurity. The President Modi and President Obama, Prime Minister Modi and President Obama met, and they agreed to draft the joint framework for US-India cyber relations, focusing on cybersecurity. And it's a very interesting framework which goes a bit further than traditional bilateral agreements between the United States and other countries, because it covers the cooperation on technical level of the technical community when it comes to cybersecurity, but also cooperation when it comes to international law and activities of the UN governance group of experts. And this is probably one, in addition to NATO declaring fourth operation domain, one of the major developments when it comes to cybersecurity. Could we just finish it, and could you just keep, Richard, the question or we may, the mic is, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let me just, the last point which is interesting is that Microsoft proposed a set of norms for governments when it comes to cybersecurity. I would say this is again conceptually interesting development. For a long time, private companies were trying to keep governments away from cyber as much as it is possible. Now you have a private company coming and saying, okay, we need you basically, we need governments, and we propose the rules that could be useful for governments. Richard, could you make just a brief comment? Richard Hill, please.
Sorry, not a comment or question, a point of information. We kicked off this month in Switzerland the campaign, the official campaign the government did and the opponents did for the referendum against the surveillance law, which will be voted on 25 September.
Okay.
So I think that's also an interesting point, because although Switzerland is a small country, it will be a popular vote, and we'll see how people actually react to a surveillance law if they're asked to vote on it, which might be surprising, as we learned from recent referendums.
Yeah, thank you for that information. Well, summary for security, constantly important, rising in relevance, moving to the global politics, having more and more bilateral agreements and different cooperation. Next. Privacy, human rights field. The first development is the US-Europe Privacy Shield. For those of you who are new in this discussion, this is the question of replacement of so-called safe harbor agreement. For a long time, US and European Union bridged the different way of regulating data protection and privacy through so-called safe harbor agreement, which means that when European data, where the privacy protection is higher, are in the United States, there should be in a way isolated from US law and in safe harbor having higher level of protection. That concept was basically annulled by the decision of European Court of Justice, and since then European and the US decision makers have been trying to find a new scheme in which they will bridge this sort of difference in the privacy protection. It is extremely important issue because we are speaking about huge flow of data across the Atlantic Ocean, because as you know, 90% of internet searches in Europe are done on Google, many users on Facebook, and the underlying question is this flow of data across the Atlantic Ocean to the servers mainly in the United States. Russia passed a bill as a part of new anti-terrorist law is proposing mandatory cryptographic backdoor in all messengers applications. Therefore, it is requiring that all producers and providers of internet services to provide governments with a backdoor. This is again the question like with the snooper or Apple FBI controversy. Many governments are trying to find the backdoor to the online communication, and in this case there is a bill which they adopted, and it will request all internet service providers in Russia to provide the access to the encrypted communication through the back door. Human rights rapporteur on freedom of expression keeps focusing on online. In his latest report, he proves that more and more of freedom of expression is affected by private networks, and that by platforms created, maintained, and operated by ICT companies and organizations. Therefore, in his report, he's arguing for that strong link between question of freedom of expression, protection of freedom of expression, and the role that private companies and private entities have in this field. Next. On infrastructure, question of the cables, basis of the internet, we have a really worrying signal that only 12% of internet users connect through the so-called Internet Protocol version 6, IP version 6. For those of you who are new in this field, internet has names and numbers. The pool of the numbers, so-called version 4, has been depleted due to the number of the internet users' devices connected to the internet. And it is already depleted. There are no additional numbers to be assigned to new users. It is a really worrying signal, because nowadays, when every car, home appliance, even our clothes will be in a way internet, to some extent internet enabled, the limited number of IP numbers could be a limit. Therefore, internet community created version 6, IP version 6, has been deployed slowly. It wasn't as fast as it is, and today only 12% of the users have the access and can use this facility. European Union plans to modernize European standardization system through a joint initiative on standardization and among other initiatives. Just to provide a bit of a context, European Union has been for quite some time concerned about lack of protection of public interest in standardization processes. As you know, standardization processes are quite open. IETF, which is the International Engineering Task Force, sets the standards for the internet. Anyone can join those meetings. They're quite open and inclusive. But European Union and quite a few other countries express concern that in addition to the openness, we need some other mechanism to protect properly public interest. And the European Union is making this move in this direction. As of January 2017, application in Apple App Store can only use so-called secure connection, HTTPS. S stands for secure connection. Therefore, all producers of apps for the Apple must have it as a sort of a solution. Next. Net neutrality, just a brief context. Net neutrality relates to the possibility of having equal status of different type of traffic over the internet, not having VIP internet and other internets. As you know, earlier this year, European Union adopted the European Parliament, adopted the regulation on the net neutrality, but it contained a bit of ambiguous, some gray zones and ambiguous rules. Therefore, what was done by BEREC, BEREC is European Union Association of Telecom Operators. They now made some clarification for the national internet and the telecom interpretation of the European Parliament rule. And one, probably the most important, is that zero rating is allowed. Zero rating refers to possibility of the internet companies, such as Facebook, to offer with telecom operators limited access to the internet. It's a big issue in developing countries, for example in India, which basically banned zero rating service. We have here a zero rating is allowed, but depending on the market share of both the operator and the company providing the free content. That's again, they bit specified European Parliament regulation, but it is still a bit ambiguous. What does it mean, market share? Does it mean if Facebook is dominant in one country, that it shouldn't provide a service? Therefore, we'll need probably more further interpretation how it is going to be applied. A big news is that US Appeal Court uphold the net neutrality rules introduced by Federal Communication Commission, and telecom companies are indicating that they will appeal to the Supreme Court and they will challenge this ruling. Again, a brief background: earlier this year in February, Federal Commission on Communication Commission in the United States declared that net neutrality principle should govern internet development in the United States, and that telecom operators, Verizon and the others, cannot create a different type of internets, VIP, fast internet, slower internet. The traffic should be equally treated, which was a great news for Silicon Valley. They're strong supporters of the net neutrality. But it was challenging the appeal court, and it seems that there were not sufficient argument to challenge net neutrality principle. Next. E-commerce and internet economy. OECD met in Cancun for their ministerial meeting on digital economy between 21st and 23rd of June, last week. OECD has been one of the most proactive organizations when it comes to internet policy. They have so-called guidelines, which are not legally binding, but which are extremely influential in the development of the national and regional roles. You have guidelines on a question of privacy, taxation, you name it, and you have it. Now they realize that they have to do something. There are quite a few challenges, and they have to do something with the digital economy because it's growing very fast, and they held a meeting in Cancun. Now, what was one of the conclusions is that they cannot make only policies for the silos, for taxation or for data. The policy has to be across the board. Therefore, it has to be, in a way, trans-silos covering various issues. I've been reading carefully the conclusions because there were high expectations from the meeting. We were aware that the issue itself is so complex that I was a bit pessimistic about concreteness of the outcomes, and this is what has proven as outcome. OECD upheld the principles that internet development should be based on open standards, open market, and open governments. Therefore, it should be inclusive. Again, the key word was trust. Internet should be trustworthy. We have to increase the level of trust. There was an interesting discussion on balancing act, and we will be facing it more and more. Can we have both, for example, privacy and security? Can we have both protection of the interests of the users and the companies? And many discussants in OECD in Cancun argued that yes, we can have win-win solution. Some cynical views were arguing that realistically it's not possible, that we have to have in some cases, win-lose or zero-sum situation. That is going to be one of the underlying theme of internet governance, and not only internet governance. Can policymakers find this golden formula and protect divergent interests? European Union has been facing many challenges when it comes to so-called collaborative economy or shared platforms. I'm sure that most of you are using it. It's a great enabler, but it is Airbnb when we are traveling, or when it's Uber when we are trying to find a flat Airbnb, or traveling with Uber and other services. I'm sure if you go around the table that most of you have been using these sharing services. This sharing economy poses the real challenge. It is a great enabler. It activates dormant resources like car, which is parked in the garage. But it is also challenging the social and economic relations in societies worldwide. When it comes to taxation, when it comes to the public policy, regulation and other issues. European Union has been trying to do it, and I think the Commission realized that they have to make some proactive moves. because as you will see, the Berlin decided, for example, to ban Airbnb for all of those who rented more than 50% of time per year, with a possible fine of 80,000 euros. There are discussions in Barcelona. You know what's happened with Uber in Paris. And in Europe, at least, we'll hear from our colleagues in the other continents, there is a big discussion on the shared economy. European Union had to do something. They issued non-binding guidelines on sharing economy, basically saying, this is reality. Don't be too harsh. Advice to governments and local authorities. Don't be too harsh. You cannot stop it. Give us some time. We will produce something that should work for both sharing economy and protection of public interest. I'm now summarizing the long paper. You can find the whole narrative in that openness and this, but it's basically the message from European Union. In India, on taxation issue, a purchase made online will attract a uniform goods and services tax. In Russia, new law set to impose VAT on foreign internet companies selling online content. That's becoming big time pressure on the governments to have more income from the internet and to have more sort of control over shared economy. And the most of the balances and most of the difficult decisions will be made in this field because they affect the economy, they affect public policy. Next, Arvind. Jurisdiction and legal issues. This month was, as you can see, there is a sign equal. There were no major developments. The first major development was Israel court decision to have a 400 million class action against Facebook. And what is very interesting conceptually, Israel's court ruled that California jurisdiction clause in Facebook terms of use is invalid. When you press I accept terms of conditions for Facebook, Google, or whatever else, we basically give the right of jurisdiction to the mainly courts in California where these companies are based. In this case, Israeli court said that's fine, but we don't care. This clause is invalid. And I think in that context, this is an important decision. Another court case which was initiated in California by a Paris attack victim's father, who accuses Google, Facebook, and Twitter of offering material support for terrorists. I read the background document. It is very interesting, at least academically. Obviously, legally speaking, all companies reacted that they have a policy against violent extremism, but there is quite a strong argument, and the victim's father put a lot of efforts consulting lawyers, anthropologists, communication experts to build this case. It's very unlikely that he will win this case, but it may also make another push when it comes to the internet governance and make these companies more cautious about use of their platforms. Again, very delicate issue. How they can prevent it? What is their power of Google and Facebook to prevent use of their platforms? U.S. Appeals Court indicated that Vimeo cannot be held liable for copyright infringement for unknowingly hosting older music uploads by its users. This is so-called responsibility of intermediaries, where the US courts and also European courts have been trying to shield intermediaries from the responsibility, legal responsibility when it comes to the internet issues. You're still with me? Yes. And our online participants? Okay. Next, we are coming to the last major issue, which is Ayanna Transition. And Ayanna Transition got approval from the NTIA, National Telecommunication Information Agency, which is a part of the US government. That proposal for Ayanna Transition, for ICANN Transition, now I'm with acronyms, please interrupt me if I'm going too much into acronym soup, is in accordance for the requirements that US government posed for the effective transition. Again, the context, on the 14th of March 2014, US government posed the conditions under which ICANN can be delinked. ICANN is Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers in charge of the big Internet address book. They posed conditions under which conditions ICANN can be delinked from the supervision of the Department of Commerce. For 2 years, in quite laborious and intensive process, I heard involving 7,000 meetings. Different communities were working on the proposal. This proposal was now sent to US government, and US government said, that's fine, you can go ahead with this transition. But, as you know, it's a very political year in the United States, and Senator Cruz proposed a bill requesting Congress to authorize this transition. It is very emotionally framed bill that Democrats, in this case, are giving up of a great asset of the US intellectual history, and the Congress should make a decision on it. Based on my discussion with people who know better the dynamics in Washington, they think that it's very unlikely that the Congress will approve this bill. Therefore, Ayanna Transition will continue as it is planned by 30th of September. And at that point, it will delink this link between US government, and it will be passed for the, let's say, global community as it was proposed by Ayanna Commission. Now, in the transition process, there have been some issues which are contentious, and but due to the timing, especially the end of the term of among other things, of the President Obama, they were parked in so-called work stream 2. And one of the big issues on the work stream 2 will be issue of jurisdiction. Therefore, while the transition is basically delinking the link between Department of Commerce and ICANN, there is still jurisdiction of the Californian-based courts of ICANN, and the risk and uneasiness of some governments, so-called minority group governments, who raise this issue that it remains an open issue. Therefore, it will be discussed in the work stream 2. Well, that's it all from June. Well, I can see the mistake, and for July, it's in main events in July. Next, Arvin. Yeah, sorry for that mistake. Human Rights Council is finishing its meeting on the 1st of July. There was a report by Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Expression. There will be Mobile World Congress in Shanghai, and you can notice there are more and more policy events in China. There was a World Internet Conference, there is a Mobile Congress, and China is intensifying its presence in digital policy. There will be high-level political forum on sustainable development in New York. Very important 2 events for the Internet Governance Forum. There will be open consultations and so-called MAG meeting. MAG is Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group of Internet Governance Forum. But what is even more important, there will be retreat discussing future of the Internet Governance Forum for the next 10 years. And this is an important issue because UN General Assembly approved the extension of Internet Governance Forum for the next 10 years. And now many players are seeing that Internet Governance Forum have to evolve, have to be more strengthened, have to have the new features, and that will be discussed during the retreat in New York. On 30th July, World Smart City Forum in Singapore. Singapore is one of the first, let's say, smart cities with heavy use of the Internet of Things and connection of the Internet. Therefore, they will have, it's natural that they host this summit. IGF United States in Washington, bless you. And ASEM meeting. ASEM stands for Asia-Europe meeting, which is the head of the states of meeting in Ulaanbaatar. ASEM meeting will have this year connectivity as a topic, connectivity between Asia and Europe. And we have been involved in preparing this ASEM meeting. Diplo runs public diplomacy courses for the ASEM community, and I've contributed paper on how Asia and Europe can connect through the use of the internet, and what are the possibilities. There will be UNCTAD meeting in Nairobi, and the aid for e-commerce, aid for e-trade, is one of the topics which will be high on the agenda of UNCTAD. This is for people, especially in Geneva. There is a strong move towards e-trade and e-commerce and link to the sustainable development. ITF meeting, ITF stands for International Engineering Task Force in Berlin. LAC, IGF, Latin American IGF in San Jose. Asia Pacific IGF in Taipei, and Big Data World Forum in Beijing. This is second big major event in China, which will be hosted next month. This is more or less all for the both summary what's happened during the previous month and announcement of the future developments. Next, we have two short announcements about, could we have the issue 12 of the Geneva Internet Platform newsletter will be ready on Thursday. Therefore, you can access it. Therefore, you will have a bit more elaborate discussion on the points that we covered today. Also, editorial reflections on the dark web and cybersecurity, how dark web can impact cybersecurity. And we will skip the July briefing, and the next briefing will be on Tuesday, 30th of August, then when we'll combine both developments in July and August. That's more or less all for this introductory sort of survey. Now it's a time for questions. Before we move to the regional developments, time for your questions and comments, both online community and in situ community. Richard, please.
Just three little things about the Ayanna transition. Although substantially what you said is of course correct, NTIA has clearly indicated that they will approve it, but I think if I'm not mistaken, technically they just said that they were okay with what was produced so far, but they're not going to give the final approval until a couple of other things that are in the pipeline have to be formalized, which I don't think is going to be a problem, but I think so technically they have not yet actually approved it, and they probably won't until like 30 September, that is when they'll make the formal announcement. There's something that several people have raised which is still not clear. It's not clear whether they're going to keep the contract for the root server or not. U.S. government right now has contract for the authoritative root server, and it's never been stated explicitly whether that is going to also be rescinded or whether they're going to keep that one. So that's a thing. And on the jurisdiction, yes, it's on the list of Workstream 2. I'm not following Workstream 2, but my colleague who is following it thinks that they're not going to do much with it. And I argue that even if they do something with it, nothing will happen because the new ICANN bylaws, which have already been approved, clearly state that it's a California company and it's also in the Articles of Incorporation. And under the new bylaws, it's extremely difficult to change either the bylaws or the Articles of Incorporation. So it's never going to happen. Even if everybody says we want to change jurisdiction, I don't see how ICANN itself. So ICANN has now made the decision that it wants to be in the U.S. Okay. Quite formally, because they've put that in the bylaws in a way that's very unlikely that it would change.
Thank you, Richard, for this clarification. You're right, the NTA issued assessment report. Therefore, their assessment report is based there, but the formal decision is not made yet. Well, on question of jurisdiction, it is a big and open issue, and we don't have a Nigel here to give us sort of detailed reflections on that, but we'll follow it closely. Do we have any other comments, question, please? Yeah.
Does this mean that ICANN will be headquartered in the U.S.?
Yes.
And not anywhere else?
The bylaws say it's headquartered in Los Angeles.
And that's where they're going to have to do that instead of coming to Switzerland?
Well, they could change the bylaws, but as I said, it made it very difficult to change.
Well, the question was if the ICANN is incorporated in the United States, and the answer provided by Richard is yes. According to bylaws, it is incorporated legally in Los Angeles, and it will be very difficult to change. While it is important, one has to keep in mind that it is not necessarily, it doesn't mean that all ICANN operations are based in the United States. You have office in Geneva, in Singapore, Istanbul. I think this engagement center is in Beijing, and I would say that most of the staff is basically outside the United States. but the legal incorporation of the ICANN is in the United States. There is a bit of one sort of, it's not black and white in this context. There is also analog solution, because some of the contracts which ICANN signs could be under different jurisdictions. Therefore, it could be under, let's say in Istanbul, under Turkish jurisdiction, in Switzerland, in Geneva, Swiss jurisdiction. That's sort of one argument that ICANN is using, that it is not necessarily completely under the US jurisdiction. Okay, do we have Roxana any comments or question from our online community?
Hello everyone, a big hello also from our 33 participants online. I would like to start with Nigel's quick comment that the working group on accountability...
Nigel is still with us.
Yes, Nigel from ICANN. He made a point about the working group on accountability meeting in Helsinki, in a meeting that just ended last week. And he will give us more information soon about the meeting on accountability there. Then we have a question from Amrita. How do we foresee the jurisdiction issue being addressed in the future in the workstream 2? And another question from Romina from Argentina on the Brexit issue. How do we see the impact of protectionist trends post-Brexit? We see it with the economy. Can we envision something similar for the internet? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nigel, for for following us from Helsinki. ICANN is meeting right now in Helsinki. Therefore, Nigel is the reason why he's absent from the room today. Regards to Nigel. Second question was on question of jurisdiction. When it comes to jurisdiction, to the large extent, like most of the ICANN-related issues, the major issue is quite symbolic for governments. And symbolic in the sense that ICANN has never, somebody correct me, there was some with Iraq, some problem, but ICANN never misused its possibility to, let's say, delete country from the internet or to interfere with the national domain name throughout the history. My argument is often that it is, to the large extent, the international customary law, instant customary law. And the most elegant solution, which I don't know why it is not entertained, is that just US government and other actors, maybe advisory opinion International Court of Justice, just recognize this customary law. And once root zone, which is basically the most contentious issue, root zone is the top domain where the country's names .ch are listed and the other, could be protected by this international customary law, and it would be at that point outside jurisdiction of any court, including the US California court. This is the most contentious issue, which was in a way brought into the focus by so-called Iran case, where the Iran expat community in the United States wanted to seize .IR in order to get compensation for the loss during the nationalization by Ayatollahs and the other things. And it was quite serious court case. It wasn't upheld in the, it's on appeal, but very, very unlikely that it will be upheld. Especially in California, which has a special law for, but the first one was in Californian.
No, that's a different one.
Yeah.
The current one was dedicated under DC law.
Under DC law. Okay. There were some governments ask, okay, if somebody comes and for whatever reasons requests the ICANN to remove whatever domain, what if the US courts decides that there is a reason for that? It is very speculative, unrealistic outcome, but theoretically speaking, it's possible. Therefore, the question is how to protect this top-level domain from jurisdiction from any court, including the US court. And that, I think it will be around for quite some time, whether it will be solved through workstream 2 or other discussion, but it will be one of the hot potatoes in discussion on the ICANN future. Well, okay.
Yeah, just on that, some of the, now that everybody agrees that the transition, Ayanna transition is probably going to go through, some people have actually gone back and looked at the original green paper and the white paper. And one of the reasons why the US government had a deal with ICANN was to shield it from antitrust. and this kind of court case. So every time this kind of court case has come up, ICANN has always argued, but wait a minute, we're just doing what the government tells us to do. Now, after the transition, they will no longer be able to make that argument. So it's not clear, I think you're right, the current Iran case is going to go nowhere, but it's not clear if some future case, which has started when ICANN really is completely private sector entity, would have a different outcome, because they'll no longer have the argument that actually we're just an agent of the US government.
Well, that's an interesting aspect. Thank you, Richard, for bringing that. Romina, on the question of protectionist trends, this is possible long-term impact of Brexit as important event. As you know, throughout the history, small developments accumulate, and you have the first rightist or leftist protesting about the development after certain developments. But why Brexit is important? Because it is the major event in the major country which has been shaping the global developments, basically arguing that questioning the globalization paradigm, that half of the society in different ways for different reasons. We are following it. There was manipulation, there were other things, but there was a quite important message that some questions about the globalization should be revisited or handled with care, as World Bank report has also argued. Therefore, that's definitely is going to be an idea that other players and countries and governments will exercise. Suddenly it became possibility, it became reality. And it also makes very important, sends important message for digital policy community gathering online and here around the table, that very responsible, evidence-based and solid discussion has to be made. The time of the hype, of the rhetorics, hiding behind the big statement, I think is over. If we want to preserve one internet and all enabling potentials of the internet, that discussion has to be really engaging, substantive and solid. And that's probably one of the major messages, at least for me, which the Brexit is bringing as an alert signal. We have a, Stian, please.
Yes, hello. I have a question on your Russia change of laws, where they would impose VAT on foreign internet companies selling online content. So what exactly would they be taxing? I'm just not quite sure how that happens. Is a university journal selling access to its papers, would they be taxed on that? Or are we talking about, when you use Facebook, you don't pay a price for it, you pay in data. So what exactly, how are they going to calculate it is just what I'm trying to get. So if you have any information and details on that, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you can see, we have three layers. We have the two-pager briefing, we have the sort of slides, and we have in-depth analysis. Now, if I don't find it quickly, I'm going to send a follow-up comment. But knowing the logic on this, knowing the logic of this sort of developments, is that yes, it will probably request the internet companies like Facebook to pay VAT, Russian VAT, for all transactions that involve Russian citizens and entities. This means if somebody is in Russia buying something over that's Facebook, that would be requested that most likely Facebook in this case ensure that VAT is paid to Russian authorities. Well, I'm just eBay or whatever. I mean, I mentioned Facebook probably is not the best example because we use it more for the advertising or yeah. Let's say probably the better examples are eBay or purchasing books online, Amazon or something very.
When you make an export, you don't pay VAT. How you will charge a foreign entity, because you can charge someone that is abroad according to your national, because those companies, generally there are tax exemptions treaties, and a company that's abroad, even if sell something, is exempted from your custom duty. Only, maybe will be the user or the buyer will be charged, but you can send a bill outside your...
According to Ottawa principle of OECD, yes, you can, seller has...
Yeah, well, actually VAT, as far as I can tell, is very most complex bit of tax law that exists. You thought income tax was complicated, try to understand VAT. But for example, in Switzerland, if you buy something abroad, yeah, you do as the individual end up paying the VAT. But to see, they can impose it on the company. They can say to the company, if you want to ship it to Switzerland, then you have to collect the VAT and send it to us. Now, the company doesn't have to do that. But then if they catch the company, they can levy a fine on it and so on. And I think in Europe, they've actually made that agreement. So in Europe, actually, it is collected by the companies. And somebody was complaining, actually, this creates a penalty for a small retailer. Because a small retailer now needs to set up all the computer software to figure out all this VAT that he has to collect, because the rates are not the same, right? The rates vary by country, and then pay the bill. And so basically you wind up giving your business to Amazon because there's no way that you yourself can do all that bookkeeping. So while in principle this seems reasonable, you know, you should pay the tax, actually it can have significant effect of making it much more difficult
to the small
guys. Yeah.
Well, it is the Ottawa principles of OECD. We just mentioned the Cancun meeting are probably one of the most important, and in that negotiation, United States wasn't very satisfied with the solution because their sellers companies have the higher sort of transaction cost, because it's up to them to ensure that VAT is paid. Now governments, as we know, governments govern through intermediaries more and more. They want to go after every citizens to collect the tax. Well, in some cases, yes, but generally speaking, they prefer to deal with the companies. And I think this is the logic behind the Russian government proposal. Okay, we will impose the tax. Now, how it is going to applied? They can introduce fines if companies are not observing it, and there are different ways. We'll send you more detailed analysis in the follow-up. Well, if you don't have any other question, I would like just to... okay.
Now, the thing that you see, both the UK and Russia, although the Russian one is more drastic, have adopted kind of the same idea. If a service provider is encrypting, then the law enforcement authorities can ask the service provider to decrypt. But that doesn't do anything against end-to-end encryption. So if I encrypt, for example, using pretty good privacy, they can't do anything about that, except try to make PGP illegal, but that's difficult. Now, the only thing stopping people from doing that is that it's not that easy to do, although the techies tell you it's easy to do. Well, having just done it, let me tell you, it's not all that easy to do. On the other hand, it's doable. Okay, if anybody knows something about computers, within about 1 day, you manage to figure it out and get it working. So actually, if you really want undefeatable encryption, right now, there's no government that's attempting to prevent that. And there's several techniques. You can buy paying software, and it's not that expensive. Like for $100, you get a package, and then it works, you know, and you don't have any hassles. The one I did was free. So when it's free...
You mean Proton and Silent Circle?
For example, yeah. And even there are lots of... McAfee, I think it was, sells a product. Symantec sells a product. What I did is using open source software, so it's quote-unquote free. It's not free because it took me 8 hours, but you know, but I didn't pay any money. But if I wanted to pay $150, I'd get a complete plug-in for Outlook, which implements encryption that supposedly nobody can defeat.
Okay, thank you for this update. Therefore, the next step, probably for some governments, will be how to decrypt the encryption used by end user, by private user. It doesn't involve the entities, sort of in between. Okay. Okay. Good. Now, from this global survey, I will just, as you know, in our briefings, we move from the global to regional and then to national. I'll just go quickly through summaries from our hubs, and after that, online and other users can follow the statements from hubs after we finish the global survey. In Brazil, we have a decree regulating the Brazilian Bill of Internet Rights, Marco Civil. In Peruvian, governance adopted the right to be forgotten to individuals. In Argentina, a right to access to information is a public right. In Indonesia, Ministry of Telecommunications started a project to boost technological entrepreneurship. And the first bank is the people that launched the satellite for internet communication is People's Bank of Indonesia. Therefore, they are providing access. Obviously, Indonesia has many islands, and it is done in Indonesia. ASEAN countries had a meeting, 10 nations of ASEAN, they had a meeting of defense ministers, establishing expert working group on cybersecurity for closer cooperation among ASEAN countries. From MENA region, we have a draft cybercrime law in Egypt, which created quite a few turbulences and which penalized quite hardly with the 25 years sentence some misuses of the abuses of the internet, especially for so-called support of terrorist activities. Again, the criticism from a civil society is that it's not clear what is understood as a terrorist activity, and it was one of the major developments in MENA countries' discussion on this draft law. It was proposed by Egyptian Prime Minister. I would like to thank you all online and our colleagues here in Geneva for joining us for this briefing for the month of June. We will be continuing online with the statements from Indonesia, Brazil, and MENA countries. Since we won't be having this, we'll have a break, summer break. I wish you really pleasant and enjoyable holidays. While we discuss the internet and digital, try to reduce use of mobile phones and your computers during the holidays. And we are looking forward to seeing you again on the 30th of August for our briefing, what's happened to during hopefully quiet summer, but you never know in these days and times how dynamic and quiet summer will be. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good morning, Jovan and everyone. So over the past month, we have some interesting development here in Brazil and in Latin America with regard to digital rights. We had the approval of the decree regulating the Marco Civil 1 month ago that had some very interesting new elements for the juridical system in Brazil. The decree regulated the net neutrality exceptions, data protection online, and the implementation of the Marco Civil. It was particularly interesting to see that the decree explicitly banned paid prioritization and all the commercial practices that can jeopardize the open and unrestricted nature of the internet. So this has been used as an argument against zero rating, highlighting that zero rating, according to the regulation and also according to the Marco Civil, is actually not to be considered as legal. And also it has been used as an argument against data caps in fixed internet. A couple of weeks ago there was a public hearing at the chamber in Brasilia, where some heated discussion was triggered by the possibility of data caps being introduced in fixed internet, and particularly by the possibility that Anatel, the regulator, will decide on this. Indeed, some opponents of these practices highlighted that, according to the Marco Civil regulation, Anatel is not the only body that will have to decide, but the Marco Civil regulation says that Anatel has to follow the guidelines of CGI, the Internet Steering Committee. So this is actually a quite unique model where a regulator has to follow the guidelines defined by a multi-stakeholder body, and we will see in the forthcoming weeks what will be the outcome. Another interesting point of the Marco Civil regulation was the regulation of data protection online, but this part of the Marco Civil regulation does not apply generally. So in this moment there is a regulation of data protection online, but not a general data protection regulation. Although a bill has been introduced at the Congress, and the rapporteur of the new General Data Protection Bill has opened another public consultation to receive feedback on this. So this consultation will be open until the end of July, and then the outcome will be consolidated in the bill. And last but not least, speaking about data protection, our partners of Untitled in Peru highlighted that the Peruvian Data Protection Authority took a decision granting the right to be forgotten to Peruvian citizens, and also to all the entities that are established in Peru and will have the possibility to ask to search engines like Google to delist personal information concerning them personally. And last but not least, we had news from Argentina, where the Supreme Court decided that every citizen has a right to access public information, stressing that public information is not the property of the state, but is the property of people and of the nation. And with this, we finish our monthly contribution. We wish you a very good debate, and speak to you next week.
Hello, Jovan of DiploFoundation and Geneva Internet Platform participants. My name is Arko Hananto, Director of Social Cultural Affairs and International Organization of Developing Countries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Indonesia. This is from GIP Hub Jakarta. I would like to share our development in Indonesia and also of the region. First, the Ministry of Communication and Informatics Technology of Indonesia has recently launched national movement to boost, create more digital startup entrepreneur, or in Indonesia we call it technopreneur. Within the next 4 years, or by the year of 2020, Indonesia aims to create 1,000 technopreneurs. This target expected to have a business value of 130 billion US dollar with a growth rate of 50% per year. BRI in Indonesian abbreviation, which is a bank, prominent bank in Indonesia, has recently launched on 19th of June 2016 has launched a satellite through Ariane 5 rocket in the Guyana Space Center. BRI became the first bank in the world that has its own satellite. By this satellite, this bank would serve all the islands in Indonesia, which encompasses 17,000 islands, and it can reach the most remote places in Indonesia. These satellites will save telecommunication costs by about 50%. The third development is that the Central Bank of Indonesia has recently hit by cyber attacks. However, because of the regional cooperation the Central Bank of Indonesia has with several other central banks in the region, this attack has been averted successfully. The bank hit by similar attacks and was sharing the IP addresses used by the perpetrators. No money was lost in the attacks on Bank of Indonesia, which were mainly DDoS or distributed denial of service attempts, or by disabling websites by flooding them with internet requests, overwhelming the servers temporarily. The fourth development in Indonesia and the region is that the 10 nations of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, has agreed to set up a committee on cybersecurity. On the 10th ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting in Vientiane in Laos, by the end of May 2016, have adopted the concept paper on the establishment of the ADMM Plus Experts Working Group on Cybersecurity. this working group is participated by the 10 Asian countries and also the United States, China, Australia, India, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Russia. This working group works for the countries involved to exchange expertise, knowledge, as well as to promote practical cooperation in the area of cybersecurity and also share of its best practices. Thank you for the opportunity, and hope to see you next in the next opportunity when it comes. Thank you again. Goodbye.
Geneva Hub, June 2016. Topic: the Cybercrime Law in Egypt. On last May 2016, the Egyptian Parliament started working on a new project. A draft bill related to cybercriminality, submitted by Prime Minister Tamer Shihawi, in which he states new sanctions to a number of illegal crimes and practices on the Internet. Shihawi's suggestion came as a reaction against what he called chaotic and individual violations on the Internet. He justified his proposition by the fact that this law aims to protect national security, insisting that the constant threats to Egypt's national security are mostly and more importantly occurring on the cyberspace and through modern technology. He then highlighted the obligation of the state to take strict measures to counter these threats in order to protect what he called oblivious citizens. Different points have been highlighted in this version of the text, excluding the criminalization of electronic acts such as electronic fraud, creating websites to encourage terrorism, or the transfer of information. This new legal text provides penalties such as blocking websites or cancellation of their licenses by court orders. But most importantly, the penalties that go from imprisonment for several months to life imprisonment or death penalty. The bill mandates a life sentence of 25 years for anyone, I quote, who creates or uses a website with the aiming to establish a terrorist entity, promote its ideology, exchange its assignment or funds, or provides money or explosive to the benefits of such entities. But there is no clear definition of what is a terrorist entity. The law also stipulates 3 years imprisonment or a fine of 2 billion Egyptian pounds, it's about $225,000, for any service provider that fails to comply with the criminal court decision to block certain websites or links. The sentence goes from life imprisonment to death sentence, with a fine not exceeding 2 million Egyptian pounds. It is $2.25 million. The Association of Freedom of Thought and Expression, AFTE, the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights and Support of Information Technology Center, said the bill would affect the rights and freedoms of all Internet users in Egypt. They published a report on the bill titled Integration Technology. In their report, they stipulate that the draft of law consists of most partial articles that are poorly worded and vague. The right group said that in their statement it would also hurt the country's economic, social, and political robustness. For instance, they describe Article 11 to 13 as in the bill as the most dangerous, imposing extremely hard penalties, including rigorous prison sentence and high fines for anyone convicted of committing public order crimes online. That's the end of the book. Thank you.